Hello.
Thank you, Councillor Barkwell. Oh, there, you're both here. Okay. I will call to order the afternoon council meeting of March the 8th. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming on the District of Summerland YouTube channel at youtube.com District of Summerland. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Members of the public may access the meeting or participate in the following ways. Watch the meeting live or recorded. Again, at youtube.com District of Summerland, either live or recorded. You can request to speak during the meeting. If you haven't already registered in advance, you may speak during the public comment opportunities. To connect to the meeting by calling the meeting conference line at 778-907-2071 and entering meeting ID 506-489-9374 and passcode 485186. After I have provided everybody who has pre-registered with an opportunity to comment, the floor will be open to those on the conference line. Corporate officer, there you are. Are there items to introduce as late items?
Thank you, Your Worship. We do have one item to introduce. It's to amend the recently
I can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
So again, there is a late item to request council amend the agenda to add. It's a recently adopted fees and charges bylaw. Council at their February 26th special meeting requested that we remove a fee for a small single-use propane tanks. And this report is being introduced to give first 3 readings to remove that particular fee. You're mute.
Now it's me. That will show as 8.1.
7.13.
Oh, 7.1. Sorry, 7.13.
Correct. We'll just add it at the end of the business items, Madam Mayor.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. And is that the only thing that requires changes to the agenda?
Actually, Madam Mayor, I could also mention on the agenda under item 4.1, there is the February 26, 2021 is special meeting minutes. I believe the special minutes were attached to the agenda, but there is a committee of the whole is listed on the agenda. So,
okay, thank you very much. Okay, could I have somebody on council bring forward the agenda as amended for adoption, please? Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Holmes, all in favor? And any opposed? Okay, that carries. And now on to adoption of the minutes. So adoption of the regular afternoon. Sorry. Adoption of the February 22nd, 2021 regular afternoon meeting minutes and February the 26th special meeting. Any changes? Oh, thank you, Councillor Van Elfen. No changes, I guess. Seconder? Councillor Holmes, all in favor? Thank you. It carries. No delegations today. Well, we kind of have one, but it comes under the business items. And now on to our first opportunity for public comment. I don't have my speakers list with me. Are there any people that are waiting to speak today?
there are none, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So on to item 7, business items, 7.1. This is the 2020 financial audit planning report. And Dave, I will turn it over to you to introduce our guest today.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the district is required by the community charter to have a financial audit conducted annually. Our 2020 audit is scheduled to begin next Monday, March 15th, and we're all looking forward to it here in the office. Now, Canadian auditing standards further require that the auditor shall communicate with those charged with governance with an overview of the plan, scope, and timing of the audit. So the district's auditor, BDO Canada LLP, has provided council with the district's audit planning report for the 2020 fiscal audit. And Mr. Mario Perotti, the engagement partner on the district's audit, is here today to provide council with a brief summary of this report and to answer any questions that council may have. So with that, I will now pass the discussion over to Mr. Perotti.
Thank you for the warm introduction. It's always nice to see that people look forward to having their auditors come in. And thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council, for having me here today. I understand that it is a fairly full agenda, so I'll do my best to keep the presentation brief and leave plenty of time for questions. So if it's okay, I will share my screen and walk through the important highlights before opening it up to any questions. So I have in front of you now the audit planning report that was sent to you in the council package, and these are the highlights that we have. And first is the timeline, and we are here today just ahead of March 15th to have any final discussions so that if there are any changes that council sees fit for our audit plan, we can make those changes ahead of next week's commencement of the audit. Once everything goes to plan, as I am sure it will, we'll be meeting with management in the middle of early to mid-April to finalize the financial statements and prepare them for council. And then in late April, I'll be back to discuss the results of the audit and the financial statements. And if it's council's pleasure at that time to approve the financial statements, we'll conclude our audit at that point. Now, it's important to understand why Canadian auditing standards have the requirement for us as your auditor to communicate with mayor and council. And the reason for that is that although I work closely with management, I am a contractor of council and I report to council pursuant to the community charter and our auditing standards. And so we've now completed our initial planning. We came in back in November to the district office at a socially distanced level, but we were able to conduct our initial risk assessments and determine what our audit scope would be for this year. And this is now the chance I'll bring you forward some highlights. And if there are any items that you feel need to be brought to my attention, this is the opportunity to do that. Now, of course, in any audit, it's very difficult for us to go in and look at every single transaction. So we employ a risk-based approach. We look at items and we assess risk of where there is a higher degree of risk, we spend more time auditing. Where there's a lower degree of risk, we spend less time auditing. And so there are three main risks that we've identified for the district of Summerland. And the first is management override of controls. Because senior management, and even council for that matter, are in a position where controls could be circumvented by their own volition. We have targeted procedures that we look at to ensure that we don't see any instances of controls being circumvented. The next item that we have is revenue recognition. Funding in the public sector is extremely complex with various different funding agreements, all having different stipulations. So in order to ensure that the revenue is recognized properly and you get to the proper surplus number for the year, we have other specific procedures that we do when we look at revenue. The last area of focus is the landfill liability. And I bring this up only because whenever we're determining what the cost of closing a landfill will be, we're looking 30, 40, 50 years into the future. A lot of subjectivity to have there. And so we have to spend extra time looking at the estimates and have already spent some early time looking at it this year as well, because obviously it is a complex area which requires significant judgment. And you'll notice that I've added here COVID-19 with a question mark, which was not in your report. a lot of the audits that we're conducting this year, COVID is a risk. And it's a risk because we had to work virtually and we weren't able to go through and do things the way we always did. When we came in and we did our interim procedures, we saw that the controls were still working reliably. So we did not see that as a risk to be added this year. Materiality. Materiality is because we can't go in and look at every transaction, we have to determine the scope of the audit and look at how big of an error could there be before somebody changes their decision on how they look at the financial position of the district. We've set materiality at 1.1 million this year, which is up from 750,000 last year. Remembering that last year our materiality dropped from where it was before because it was the first year that we were auditing you, and so we were still in that getting to know you phase. Now we can get back and use a proper materiality, not a reduced one, because we have a better understanding of your organization. And materiality is there to be a tool for us to determine how large our sample sizes are going to be. If we identify an error, we look at it in the context of materiality to see what happens and if it is a significant enough error to adjust. So it's not that we don't look at anything below 1.1 million, it is that this is how we determine our sampling and the scope of our audit. Our fees just highlighted here, the fees are as quoted for year 2 of our 5-year contract according to the RFP. And so now I'm going to skip to the end and just remember that we all have a role over the next 4 to 6 weeks as the audit gets conducted. My job and the job of my team is to come in and conduct the audit. Those charged with governance, mayor and council, you're here to oversee the work of your external auditor. If there's any disagreements with management, you'll facilitate resolution and you'll review the financial statements and audit report before it gets published to the public. Management's responsibility is to maintain the accounting records, maintain a system of internal controls, and prepare the financial statements in accordance with public sector accounting standards, and to safeguard the assets of the district. That was a very quick run through, but I want to make sure that we have time for questions because that's the more important part.
Any questions, Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering, how are the areas of focus identified, and are they the same as previous years, specifically the landfill liability area?
Okay. So the areas of focus are determined when we come in for our interim planning. We review your systems, your operations, and we look at how everything is flowing. And so it's either where we have an area of complexity within the accounting rules, or if we identify that there are gaps in your systems and your processes. And so that's how we determine it. And that's why, like I said, COVID is one that is on some audits and not on others. In terms of the landfill liability, that one will always be there in one form or another, just because of the complexity and the projections involved in it.
So just to follow up.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, so are those 3 areas the same as last year, or are they changed?
Those areas are the same as last year.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, Council? Okay. Having seen no hands raised, I will ask someone to bring forward. Sorry, I just have to find this again. The resolution to receive this presentation for information. Councillor Holmes and Councillor Van Elfen. Seconder. Any other discussion on this matter? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you so much, Dave and Mario, for your presentation. And we'll see you in April, I guess.
Well, thank you
Okay.
for having me again. Enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Thank you. So on to our second business item. 7.2 is the Okanagan Food Hub update, and I will pass this over to Mr. Dolivet, our Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. We are here today to present to Council an update of recent activities on the Okanagan Food Hub project, as well as activities by our contractor, who's also here today, Jane Campardo, which I'll pass it off to her in a minute to run through our recent activities, and also our partners that we've involved with this project in order to try to realize the project for the District of Summerland. We are also asking Council to further support this project moving forward with potential grant applications, which Jane will get into in a minute here, that we predict will be coming out here in the next few months. And so therefore, we're asking Council to support the submission of those grant applications. And then finally, as well, we're also asking Council to seek their support and request a presentation to the Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen for this project. So just a bit of background, the Okanagan Food Hub has been a strategic priority project of Council's for the better part of 3 years, almost 4 years we've been working on this project. It's been a strategic priority of Council's for that time period. It's still within our strategic priority project chart list, and Jane has been engaged throughout the entirety of the project, so she definitely understands the history quite well. We also provided an update to Council, the latest update that we presented back in September of 2019 as an attachment to Council's report. So it has been a while since we've been in front of Council with regards to this project to update Council on the activities that we're actively pursuing with regards to the Okanagan Food Hub. If Council remembers, we were tasked with updating and preparing a finalized business plan for this project, which was completed last March of 2020, right prior to the COVID pandemic impact. And that unfortunately had the impact of derailing some of the next steps for this project, and Jane will get into that. And so with that, I'll introduce Jane. Jane is from Engage Business and People Solutions. Like I said, working on this project as the district's contractor for the entirety of the project that was envisioned 3.5 years ago. And we're very happy to have Jane here with us today. So thanks, Jane. You're on mute, by the way.
Okay. Thank you, Brad. And thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me here today and make room on the agenda for this exciting project. I am just going to share the presentation with you. Just give me 1 second here. Can everybody see that? Okay. So thank you very much. The objective for today is to give you an overview of the Okanagan Food Hub project, update you on where we're at, identify the next steps moving forward, and then there'll be time for question and answers at the very end. And I thought I'd just have a couple slides here just to bring you up to date on the Food Hub, because it's been a while since you may have visited this project. And if you recall, the vision is to be a leader in innovating, creating, and marketing sustainable agri-food products and technologies while redefining the food system. And a lot of it has to do with that, which we'll get into later. The mission is to build regional agri-food capacity and connect food and agri-tech entrepreneurs to the right resources so that they can develop, successfully commercialize, and market those new products. And it's about helping communities in the existing food system become more sustainable, ecologically resilient, and economically robust. So this is what the business model looks like. We have the Okanagan Food Hub as the main area for food processing. It has a shared use kitchen, a wet line that would produce salsas, condiments, sauces, etc. A dry line, which would be for dried fruit snacks and dried specialty products. We would also have that entrepreneurship programming, the accelerator piece, which helps businesses through coaching and workshops to start and launch and accelerate getting an idea to market. The investment piece is working with our partners to provide financing, loans, etc., for their business support. And this whole project relies on good partnerships, strong partnerships, and we have about 12 partners that are really interested and committed to this project. And one area is in that brokerage and distribution services. And the innovation capacity is needed for ongoing food development and product development that we take to market to keep a sustainable business for entrepreneurs and for the hub. And so as a project update, Brad's already mentioned that we put this project on hold, and mostly because of the funding. We didn't have the funding programs to apply to. They were on hold for COVID relief programs. And we did have a meeting in the ministry. So we put the project on hold in April of 2020. And we had a meeting with the Ministry of Agriculture, their Regional Food Hub Network project team, in October 2020. And at that time, there was no indication of funding, and the earliest would be around the spring of 2021. With the District of Summerland has been closely working with several regional partners, and those include local government, academia, research and innovation, industry associations, and farmers and food businesses. They all continue to support this project, both in principle and with in-kind contributions to date, as well as the district's financial support to date. And we really appreciate every partner in that. And we've recently signed Memorandum of Understanding with Community Futures and Accelerate Okanagan in February of this year. And that was in preparation for a grant that we had, that we had applied to. We also have received great strategic support from our partners. And that's, we've received 12 letters of support written by our partners. So definitely COVID has impacted some of the agri-food businesses' requirements for food processing and other services. And just in the last couple of months, I've been approached by a few businesses that have a need for processing and co-packing. And they lost their ability to do that with one of the organizations in our region not being able to provide that to them. So they're looking for that support. I've also received some businesses that are looking for that processing and food development piece. And so there's still a need and an interest in this hub. When I was reaching out to businesses in the last couple of months. And we have received letters of intent to use the hub from a few of the agri-food businesses and farmers in February of 2021. I have also had recent discussions with large corporate users that may be interested in using the hub's dryers and other equipment on a consistent basis for some of the products. And this is requiring further exploration with these potential partners or customers. And so that's a new development that sort of flipped the priority of a wet line versus a dry line into this. In terms of recent grants that we've been looking at or have applied to, the Ministry of Agriculture Regional Food Hub Network Program did have an intake in November of 2020. And for that intake, they recently, I don't know if you've seen in the paper, but they've recently announced the award to 3 food hubs. One is in Kamloops, one is in Creston, and one is in Greenwood, Rock Creek. They have a dual site, and that was received in 2021. You may be wondering why we weren't on the list for that. The district was not prepared to apply for the grant for 2 main reasons. It had a really quick turnaround time for completing that, and the success of our project requires funding commitment from other partners by the deadline date, which was early December. And we were, so that was one reason that we weren't able to apply for that grant. And secondly, we did not have a secure location for the facility. And so we are currently investigating space. The other application that has come out in February is the Ministry of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation Supply Chain Resiliency Grant. And that came out, I think it was late January. We applied by the deadline date of February 18th. And Community Futures was the lead applicant for that project. It was a collaboration angle for funding up to a maximum of $200,000. And some of the activities that we're requesting in that proposal includes market research for new product value-added opportunities specifically for the dryer. The product, it included product development and testing in collaboration with food scientists. It included specifying equipment that we require based on those select products that show us as promising, and securing a suitable location. We are wanting to explore and secure location by June, and then updating the business plan that goes along with all the research and data that we find. The third grant is the Rural Opportunities Fund, and that is one that's up to $300,000, and Community Futures has intention of applying for that in this month. And so activities that support the hub in that one would be to continue with engaging additional agri-food businesses throughout all of the Okanagan to strengthen our and to validate the demand for the hub and its equipment. It's also activities around formalizing the structure of the hub, and potentially completion of a kitchen design and commercial design for the space. Upcoming grants is stage 2 of the resiliency grant, which is accelerating manufacturing scale-up grant program. We don't know the amount for that. It's anticipated to come out this April or May. And so the amount would be yet to be determined. The Regional Food Hub Network Fund, I'm just still in touch with the Ministry of Ag to see if they're going to be having another intake. And at this stage, they can't indicate whether they will have another one this spring, but we're hopeful. There are 2 federal programs that we're also considering, and it's the Western Economic Diversification has a program, and Canadian Agriculture Partnership Agri Innovation has a program. And the funds again for those are yet to be determined if we do qualify for application for funding for that. CIDIT is, they have 2 programs right now. One is rolling out on March 19th, I believe, and one is currently open. And those 2 programs are up to $50,000 and up to $75,000. And we hope that there's going to be continued other programs for us to look at, such as Van City or Real Estate Foundation. And there may be one possibly with others that are communicated through the Community Foundation, Okanagan Similkameen. So location, as I mentioned, we weren't able to secure a location for this project before December. And there are very limited leased spaces in Summerland, but we are looking at, I'm in touch with the real estate agent to help us with our search. There are potentially a few parcels that could work for the hub, but they are for sale, properties for sale rather than for lease. We are exploring other opportunities for leasing space with private landowners. And there could be an opportunity or worth exploring that would be investigating potential of district-owned land for the hub, that the hub would be able to lease. In terms of next steps, we ask for continued support from the District of Summerland Council, and it's thank you for all your time and energy put towards this project to date. We would appreciate that moving forward. We would like to seek potential support from the RDOS and request a meeting with them. And specifically with the RDOS, a lot of our agricultural businesses that would benefit from a project like this are located throughout the entire South Okanagan. And that happens to be where a lot of the tree fruit production and vegetable growing is located as well. So it is a benefit to the region. I am in the midst of preparing a 1-page document outlining our proposal for the MLA and MP to review. And that we hope to request a meeting in the near future with both. We are continuing to update the business plan As we get more information, we will continue to update that and have it solid for the next and ready for the next application intakes. We wish to apply for grants in the spring and summer of this year, as the ones that I mentioned earlier. We need to secure a location for the hub, particularly before June, and formalize a structure for the hub, which would include all that corporate structure and governance. So that concludes my presentation. I thank you so much for this chance to provide an update. And if you have any questions, I turn it to you.
Thank you, Jane. Council, I have a few questions, but let's go to Councillor Van Elfen first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question through to Jane, if I may. Location-wise, have you had any further, I know we talked about it last time, any conversations with BC Tree Fruits on the packing house facility in Summerland? Is that an option, or are they willing to talk?
Yes, I'll answer that. Thank you, Marty, for your question. At this stage, it's not a location that we can consider at this time. And they are very interested in having further discussions with us. And Brad, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, we have had recent discussions. I was actually part of a meeting with Jane and the CEO recently, just to kind of see where they're at and also gauge their interest in this project. And they were, definitely supportive of the project, but we were unable to commit anything at this time, unfortunately. So it could be an opportunity to explore in the future.
Councillor Van Elfen, you follow up?
Please, Madam Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
I ran this by you before, Jane, or last time you came and presented to council. Any updates on cannabis infused products? Is that something that's going to fall into this food hub type concept?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, I did talk to Ontario Health Authority, one of their advisors, and they indicated that we weren't able to combine cannabis and food production at this stage. There may be opportunities down the road, but I think it's still too early to mix the two in one facility.
Okay. Other questions? Councillor Holmes.
Yes, thanks. I have a couple, if I may. First of all, Jane, I was wondering, do you get what is your sense from the provincial government on their commitment to the food hub concept, keeping in mind that, since we've last kind of dealt with it, we've had the pandemic plus an election, and would you say that their level of commitment is the same?
There's definitely interest in food security, food systems, and especially in rural communities. And we're hopeful that there'll be another intake through the Ministry of Agriculture, whether it's the same regional food hub network program or a new one. But there definitely seems to be interest in continuing to support this area. So I'm hopeful that there'll be another program to support a project like ours at the provincial level.
Okay, thank you. And another question, if I may. So previously we had the city of Penticton was supportive of us. So I'm just wondering if that support is still there, and also asking the RDS for potential support. What would that support from the RDS look like? That request.
Yeah, certainly. The city of Penticton is still very supportive of this project. We received a letter of commitment from all of our project partners from 2019, and most of them has been updated for this grant that we just applied for. So they are still very supportive of helping us communicate the project, refer businesses that have an interest in agriculture and food production. In terms, sorry, part two of your question was the RDOS, right? And we would like to first introduce this project to them. They have heard about it a while back, but it definitely needs to be updated. And so we will present to them hopefully in the near future this month, ideally. Sorry, yes, Brad?
Oh, sorry. No, that's good. Thanks,
Oh, okay.
Jane. Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I was just going to add on to your answer there. Sorry about that. Yeah, and I think that to your question there, Councillor Holmes, if I may, we do. I think at the regional district level, we should be looking to them for potential funding support. Jane and I have had discussions along with Charles from Community Futures that these type of projects, given that it's a regional focus of the project, and definitely Charles from Community Futures sees it in that lens. There's a lot of merit to getting potential financial support from the RDOS, and further, that would even strengthen our grant applications to higher orders of government at the provincial and federal level. And Jane, and reviewing other areas, they generally do have a contribution from the regional district level in supporting these food hubs. So it's something that we may want to throw their way as a potential that may come in the future when the time comes, but not necessarily right now. But I think that we may have an ask financially at their regional district level at a future point.
Yeah, and that's a good point about, especially with federal grants, they often require local, regional, and provincial funding before they would consider, or other contributions before they would consider funding our project. So it'd be nice to have each level of government represented in support of our project for sure. It definitely strengthens the project. Yes.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you for that presentation, Jane. My question is actually first follow up. What about industry support? Because I think when you look at all the agricultural programs, they're all matching, right? Industry puts in half and the government puts in half. So I'm just wondering if, which kind of leads up to my question of, do you need to have confirmed tenants, confirmed people in order to actually be successful? And do we have people that are lined up and ready to, sign their name on that line and say, I'm going to be in that facility when it exists in Summerland? Or is that still the problem, or part of the problem?
Yes, thank you. Great question. Any commitment that we can get through letter of commitment or letter of intent definitely strengthens our case for proposal. Some grants require us to have matching funds. It could be 15%, 85%, and some are 20 to 80% government versus other contribution, and other sometimes means that non-government contribution. And so yes, we have letters of intent of commitment for using our food hub by a few, and if we need to, we can creatively have that a membership signed up before the hub actually opens as a possible contribution for having industry funding. But it'll be small in comparison to the size of this overall project budget. And with industry association support, I've spoken to several industry level associations, and they all strongly support and have given us a letter of support. And when it comes to funding that program, if that's at the next stage, when we need that commitment and funding. To date, I haven't been able to receive that commitment, but it's just because of the priorities having affected some of the associations with COVID. And but I'm hoping that in the next couple of months, when we get ready for the next intake of programs, we'll be able to have a better idea of that.
Okay, sorry, I didn't necessarily mean that an association would be paying for it. I mean that the people that would like to participate and the people that are the reason that we've even been having this conversation should be contributing to it, you know, as renters, as space users, as business people. And so I just wanted to know if they were ready to do that.
Yes, and there's definitely some that are ready to start tomorrow if we had the facility open tomorrow. Yeah, and so there's the challenge is that by the time, you know, we have the interest now, and we're hoping that we'll have the good momentum so that the timing of when they want to launch their business will be in the timing that we receive funds and able to start this buying equipment for the space. And so to date, yes, we definitely have a few businesses that have said, you know, if you open, then I will definitely be a user of the hub.
The questions? Councillor Van Elfen, I'll go back to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Jane, you mentioned there's a few places, Kamloops, one, Greenwood, Rock Creek, that did receive some grant funding.
Mm-hmm.
Are they more leaning towards the ranching industry, per se? Like meat production, abattoir?
The one in Rock Creek, Greenwood, one of them does have an abattoir focus of meat production. The one in Kamloops has, I believe, preservatives like jams and preserved foods in general. And there are, I'm just trying to think, up north in Quesnel that has been awarded last year. They have a focus on fruits and vegetables, actually a variety of foods for a smaller scale batch production. And Port Alberni has a seafood focus. And so they're all, Salmon Arm has preserves as well. And they aren't, I thought that they might have a poultry and dairy angle, but they didn't specify if that was it for sure. But it sounds like they're more, have a variety of products that they're looking at. Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a follow-up question, if I may. I know you're in your presentation to have a, you know, to do a presentation to the RDOS. Have you contemplated also doing a presentation to the PIB?
And we have one of our project partners we've been working closely with from the very start back in 2019 has been Cool Group, which is the economic development arm for PIB. So yes, we're continuing discussions with them on an ongoing basis.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a few questions. Most of them revolve around grant funding. The supply chain resiliency grant that Community Future took the lead on, that's the 200,000 maximum one. Do you know if Community Future is dedicating, if they are successful, dedicating the entire application or grant, I guess, to this project, or do they have a number of projects that they're spreading it out amongst? Do you know?
Yes, that particular grant application for the supply chain resiliency program, that one is 100% dedicated to this project. And that's through as I mentioned, there's market research of evaluating a select number of value-added products and going through the whole opportunities matrix for that. It also included product testing and development with research scientists specific to this hub. And we're focusing on the dry line usage, but it doesn't have to be the dry line. But if that, I think that'll be a product that we'll definitely look at. And then specifying that equipment, looking at the location. And I don't think that there was any funds left over for the design. And then that would be rolled into another one of their programs that they are wanting to apply for, the actual design piece.
Okay, thank you. Regarding the potential for CIDIT funding, I do have an update. CIDIT has put out a call to all the mayors are considered part of the, yes, sit. And that's tomorrow at 3 o'clock. So hopefully I'll get a better understanding of what potentially the grant might look like, although you probably already know all of that. And then just a thought, when you are speaking to the RDOS,
Yeah.
even though it's called the Okanagan Food Hub, there's a lot of, as you know, a ton of agriculture, lots of it organic in the Similkameen Valley. And it would be, I think it would be wise to make sure that, you know, that it's made clear that this is a food hub that the folks, the farmers in the Similkameen Valley can use as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay, any other questions or comments? Could I have someone bring this forward for information, please? Councillor Van Elfen, seconder. Councillor Trainer, thank you. Okay, last chance. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, that carries unanimously. Thank you again, Jane and Brad. It's good to have this update.
Well, thank you very much.
Councillor Holmes?
Yeah,
Oh, yes,
thank
there's
you.
more to that resolution, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a second
Yeah.
part. So I
Yeah,
just wonder if
thank you.
there's one on that. I'll bring that forward if you like.
Yes, please go ahead. If you could read it out, please.
That the Okanagan Food Innovation and Processing Hub continues to be supported by council, including the potential location in Summerland, and that the district and partners request that the OFH project to the regional district or to the RDOS gain their support for the project, and further that council supports funding applications to future grant programs for the OFH project that are anticipated to open in the spring, summer of 2021.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Councillor Van Elfen, you're seconding? Great. Okay, so any further discussion on this portion of the resolution? I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously as well. Okay, thank you again.
Thank you.
Great, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
On to 7.3, this is for Brad as well, the Rural Recovery Advisor funding.
Thank you, Worship. We did talk briefly in the past presentation that the SIDIT, the Southern Interior Development Trust, has also recently submitted a new grant opportunity released on February 22nd, this a couple weeks ago. And specifically what they're looking for is, or providing is funding for a position, a staff position, to eligible organizations for communities that are less than 25,000 population size. They have identified two main areas of focus for these positions that would be eligible for the type of duties that would be a part of the submission. One kind of focuses more on the community economic development and recovery side of things, working probably more so with a local municipality on development of an economic development recovery plan coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in dealing with kind of broader community economic development goals of the community, you know, as the community transitions through the pandemic and then also past the pandemic, and trying to rebound, I guess you could say, their local economy. And then the second area of focus was more so tailored to the business community itself and working one-on-one with businesses, helping individual businesses transition their operations during the pandemic and then also following the pandemic, and pivoting perhaps, let's say, to other types of business opportunities, and providing that support services to the business community. Also identified were projects already in progress are eligible for this staff person to support. The deadline is March 19th, and just in terms of staff level review of it, we've identified a couple of options for council to consider in evaluating this grant opportunity. One would be to support an application in conjunction with the Chamber of Commerce, recognizing that they are the business support I guess service provider locally within Summerland, and is to support them with an application, as the Chambers of Commerce are eligible as an organization to apply for this staff position. And then also, like, this role would be probably more focused on the business transitionary focus of it. Or alternatively, we can look at a District of Summerland position that would be more focused on community economic recovery, potentially working on strategic economic development projects already identified by council, such as the previous presentation. And it'd be more of a staff, a resource position for addressing the community level economic development goals. So in our review, we feel that there might be some merit for supporting the Chamber of Commerce in providing an additional resource to the business community, and further supporting the business community as they transition through the pandemic. As well, we do have some comments here from the President of the Chamber of Commerce for Council's consideration in my report, also asking for Council support in their submission. And we're happy to recommend that we move forward with supporting them in that application process. And I'm happy to take any questions with regards to that.
Council, questions of Brad? Okay. Could I have asked someone to bring forward the resolution then, please? Councillor Barkwell, please read it aloud.
Okay, I'll do that. That council received the report from the Director of Development Services, Rural Recovery Advisory Grant Opportunity dated March 8th, 2021, and that the District of Summerland provide a letter of report to the Summerland Chamber of Commerce in the submission of a Business Recovery Advisor grant application to the Southern Interior Business and Community Recovery Program.
Thank you, Councillor Barkwell. Seconder? Councillor Patton? And now discussion. Okay, I guess there is no discussion. I will call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Brad. Next up is 7.4, Bylaw Enforcement Procedures Policy Update. And I will turn this over to our CAO for introduction, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. In the fall of 2020, Council directed staff to revisit the bylaw enforcement policy to clarify the policy goal of voluntary compliance before other actions are taken. And this is now being done, and we've also included clarity on the priority for actioning complaints. Finally, to ensure a commitment to responsiveness, there's a timeline goal of 2 business days to have initial response out to complainants. We've also been able to secure the employment of Mr. Dan Maya in the enforcement area, which will certainly support our implementation of this new policy. Dan joins us today also, and I'll turn it over to Brad and Dan to introduce work in greater detail. A key goal for today's meeting is to receive Council's adoption of the policy. And with that, I'll turn over to you and Dan there, Brad.
Sir, thanks, Graham. Just wanted to introduce Dan as well. I'm very happy to have him on board as our new bylaw enforcement officer, level 2. Dan, just for council's benefit, comes to us from the city of Kelowna. He had a number of years of experience there for the city of Kelowna, and then prior to that, the regional district of Central Okanagan. He also teaches for the Justice Institute and Focus College in the areas of bylaw enforcement, level 1 and level 2. And we're very, I think, fortunate to have Dan on board as a expert in the bylaw enforcement area. In that fact, he provides training province-wide and has looked for his leadership in the area at the provincial level. So thanks, Dan, for coming on board and helping us with our program here, the District of Summerland. And I'll pass it on to you to introduce yourself and follow on with the presentation.
Thanks. Thank you, Brad and Graham. I don't know how much comfort I have of expanding on that. I think you did a pretty good job. I do have about 20 years enforcement experience. Wise man, when I started, told me, Dan, do everything exactly the same way every time, so that when you're questioned about it, you can say, yes, I did that, or no, I did not do that, because I do everything exactly the same. So that was a part of the goal of this policy, recognizing that we're trying to get all our documents similar in nature. Bylaws should be amended on a regular basis as legislation changes at all different levels of government, whether it be the federal, provincial, or municipal, yourselves, councillors. So your worship, I do have a quick PowerPoint. I want to keep it quick so that if you do have questions of me, we have lots of time for that. I'm going to share my screen and quickly go through that. Oh, I can get rid of that page, hopefully. So the goal of updating this policy was to identify that voluntary compliance was council's ultimate desire, that we would respond to businesses, set a goal, and really 2 business days was something that seems pretty reasonable. We want to promote consistency moving forward. We want to treat everybody exactly the same way so that we have that consistency. If I deal with one neighbor, or sorry, our department deals with one neighbor, the next neighbor can expect to be treated the same way. We want to identify applicable provincial legislation as provincial legislation changes from time to time. And we also wanted to identify the authorities that bylaw officers have. So as far as formatting, the district has done a lot of the work updating the layout and formatting, numbering headers, numbering subsets. It makes it much easier to find different parts of either a policy or bylaw that you're looking at, to talk with the public and explain to them. It also makes it easier to amend if certain sections are deemed inappropriate or things change. So the updated format will help that. And the numbered sections really help get people to the right place at the right time. We want to be fair, we want to be firm, we want to be consistent. We do still have bylaws that the public gets enacted through council adopting them. That is the way we hope our citizens choose to live in our community. But we want them to be fair, we want to be firm, we want to be consistent. By firm, we focus on voluntary compliance. We will outline a timeline that we expect people to adhere to. But unfortunately, life always throws us curves on occasion. And we want to make sure that a part of that firmness is a willingness to recognize people are working with us towards compliance. And maybe they just need a little bit more time than what that initial timeline was. We also want to identify that if we can't get voluntary compliance, what does that process looks like forward? There are various levels of enforcement that we can follow. And it would be a step process. The courts love a stepped process themselves. They want to make sure that a person has been given every opportunity to comply on their own prior to us even looking at that option. So the different pieces of legislation that we get authorities from, the community charter, obviously, District of Summerland gets to incorporate through that. They get all their authorities and abilities to enact and adopt bylaws for that. We want to recognize the Freedom of Information Privacy Protection Act. Protection of Privacy Act. People's information is required to be kept confidential. There's very limited times when anybody would ever find out who complained about them. That's when you're in a courtroom and the courts and the laws state you have to share that information. So we wanted to address that in the policy. Offense Act. The Offense Act is if people are refusing to identify themselves to us, what our options are, and that is an offense to obstruct us. Local Government Bylaw Notice Enforcement Act. Council adopted a bylaw that allowed us to be a part of the Bylaw Adjudication Forum and CETA in the Okanagan. So we want to recognize that gives us an option to write a bylaw offense notice, which goes to adjudication as opposed to having to always go to court, which the municipal ticket informations did. It saves everybody time and money, and is actually a pretty good system to use, especially for a smaller community where we don't have a courthouse. It makes it much easier for us to get these matters heard. And again, those authorities come from Part 8 of the community charter as far as adopting bylaws. Myself, as a bylaw enforcement officer, your worship, you and council appointed me a couple weeks ago under Section 36 of the Police Act. We have right of entry into properties to determine if our bylaws are being complied with under Section 16 of the community charter. We have the right to demand information from the accused to ensure we're talking to the people we need to talk to. That's under the criminal code. And then, of course, again, the obligation to protect privacy under FIPA Section 30, which is important. We want people to know that with confidence that they can report a concern without that information, their information, being shared with others. As well, the person being complained against, he has a right not to have his information shared with other people either. That's just not my role. That's not the district's role. So we've made those changes to an updated bylaw enforcement procedures policy. And if you have questions for me, I am more than happy to answer.
Councillor Holmes, and then Councillor Barkwell.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for doing this. I just have a question regarding complaints, and I think if we're depending on our residents to be kind of the eyes and the ears for our bylaw enforcement, we don't necessarily want to make it a big burden on them when they register a complaint. And so I'm just wondering if there's a minor complaint, somebody's smoking or drinking in the park, they probably don't want to turn it into something big. And so how do we deal with those kind of minor complaints? And is there, can we differentiate between like a formal complaint and a non-formal complaint?
That's a good question. The challenge with having a more informal one, it's really easy to just quickly call and say, this problem's happening at this location, go have a look. The nice thing with the written complaint that you currently have, it gives me the ability to talk to the complainant directly, because some of this comes in on the weekends, some of it comes in after hours. The nice thing with the email, being able to email in the complaint form, is that it can happen at any time of day. It doesn't have to be between 7:30 and 4:30 when I'm here. But the biggest reason for me is it really makes it easy for me to talk to the person, because I really want to understand what the concern is. So while it may be, smoking in the park is one thing, and those types of calls, I think hopefully we have some ability to do some proactive patrols and try and get some of that dealt with on a proactive educational process, speak to people in the parks that are doing that. And I guess my focus for the written complaint would be more for those unsightly premises, derelict vehicles, Airbnbs, things that are happening in that, because I really want to be able to speak to the complainant and get an idea of what the concern is, how it's impacting them, how they're collecting their information, so that I can do that as well. So I don't want to say that we're never going to go check on something that gets phoned in as you suggested, a minor call. We want to be responsive to that. It was more for if there's something where an actual enforcement process is going to have to unfold, it's nice to start that whole process with a paper copy of a complaint so that we can build on it. But I don't want to say that I'm never going to go somewhere and deal with something if somebody just phones it in. I have a few people who are already quite comfortable phoning me and saying, can I add to that from last week? I'm getting to know a few of the people in town, and I'm quite happy to add to something if they've already had a concern registered with me. Hopefully that answered your question.
Councillor Barkwell.
Yeah, 2 questions, if I may, Madam Mayor. First, what happens when you're off duty, like when you're away for a week, or how are we covered here?
I think we were working on, and I thought in the budget it was approved for a 2-day-a-week position. Other than that, I would have to defer to Brad how we cover. I don't have a whole lot of time off, so that might make you happy to hear. But I think there's probably some provisions in play to cover some of that time off.
Brad, could you speak a bit further to that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Councilor Barkwell, for the question. So yeah, we did include in the budget process for 2021 a part-time role position, which was 2 days a week, spread out over the balance of the year. But the primary goal is for that position is for the 2 positions to cover each other off, with being flexible with shift schedules and also vacation time and sick time. So it is a goal to always maintain Monday to Friday coverage for regular business hours, but also we're hoping to extend into weekends and nights as well, by getting creative with our shift schedule between the 2 individuals. So especially as we go into the summer months right now, for the beach and park patrols that might be needed in the summer. So that's hopefully something we can address moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you had a second question, Councillor Barkwell?
Yes, if I could.
Yeah, please go ahead.
The question I had was concerning right of entry. Do you have to give notice that you're going to enter a property, and is it onto the property, or can you enter a residence? Because I seem to remember both cases, where bylaw is being used against grow ops and stuff, and they would give 24 hours notice and go in there big time and stuff, and where the authorities are now.
The authorities are the same, but my approach may be a little bit different. What I've proposed is, and again, going back to that fair, firm, and consistent, I like to do a door knock. I like to talk to people prior to really getting into the investigation. We are required, if we need to go into a building, we are required to give a minimum 24 hours notice. If people still deny, we are required to go get a warrant. So we won't be going into any houses against somebody's will without a warrant. The RCMP would be with us to execute that warrant. But no, there are some thoughts that I have the ability to just go into a property, but no, there's a clear process, and 24 hours notice is the minimum. Usually when you have the conversation, if I got to go get a warrant, I need to come back with the RCMP. The RCMP are going to be executing the warrant with me. I know in the past, that's usually what gets me in, and it's usually going to be for an illegal suite or an unlawful dwelling of some sort, would be why I would be entering into a property. As far as the medical marijuana grow ops, I have no authority over that. That's a federal statute, so there's really no point in me getting involved in that. My job is to enforce the District of Summerland bylaws, and that's where my focus is.
I was just recalling what was going on prior to legalization, where it was a real problem in some communities.
Yeah, yeah, and definitely theft of electricity was a big part of the reason we go in. So, but I think that's changed a bit with some of the legislative changes at the federal level.
Thank you.
Other questions? I just have one question, and I'm not sure if this is for you, Dan, or who it might be for, maybe Brad or Graham. Last year, we had increased bylaw enforcement, of course, with COVID. And I'm wondering if there is an anticipation that there will be increased bylaw again this spring and summer as we move towards hopefully herd immunity. Could anyone comment on that, please?
Yeah, I can, Your Worship, and Dan can maybe compliment me if you want, there, Dan. I think that COVID is having an impact on our operation. We are getting more complaints being submitted for bylaw enforcement due to COVID and specifically with regards to business operations primarily and whether they're being compliant with COVID regulations. And so that, first of all, there is an impact on our bylaw enforcement area, and we are tracking those complaints separately so that we will have stats that we can demonstrate to the province. Let's say if we are looking at allocating some funding from for our grant that we receive, for example, towards the program. The council has supported increasing the level of service through the 2021 budget process with that part-time role. Over and above that, we may as well additional complement that submission, within the budget, but with the grant funding from the COVID grant that we received, but in order to provide a higher level of service. But that would be something that we would have to approach when the time comes. And right now, we're hopeful that the 1.5 position will be good. I think for the summer months, but we'll have to address that as the time comes that we may need to go over budget in the bylaw enforcement area going into the balance of this year due to COVID's impacts through the summer months. But that's to be determined.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, and Your Worship, just to add a bit, one of the requests that had been made of me was to be available on occasion for weekends or evenings. You have some certain events that occur that it might be helpful to have a bylaw presence. So I have made that commitment, and as I earn the trust of the people of Summerland, I'm hoping that being a visible and a consistent presence will help with that.
Good, thank you. I really appreciate your approach. It's great. Any other questions from council? All right, could I have someone bring forward the resolutions, please? Councillor Holmes?
The council received the bylaw enforcement procedures policy from the bylaw enforcement officer dated March 8th for information, and that council adopt policy number 100.22 bylaw enforcement procedures policy, and further that council rescind bylaw enforcement policy 100.16.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Van Elfen. Any discussion on the revised policy? I guess it's not revised, it's the other one's being rescinded, but any further discussion on this? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, great. That carries unanimously. Thank you. We are right on time. Way to go. On to 7.5. Brad, this is you again, the driveway access bylaw amendment.
I'll actually, I won't do a real introduction to this one. I'll pass it off to Bobby, our engineering technologist, to introduce this item.
Thanks, Brad and Madam Mayor. So staff have drafted a couple text amendments to the driveway access bylaw, and as our new bylaw officer has noted at the start of his presentation, bylaw should be updated on a regular basis. So yeah, but before you today are a couple bylaw amendments to the driveway access bylaw, and they're intended to create transparency with the public and also to increase public safety. So the driveway access bylaw is outdated and has been irregularly updated over the past 29 years since it was adopted in 1992. And staff find that it's difficult to enforce this bylaw as it's currently non-prescriptive and open-ended. So we're tasked with researching and referencing external sources that aren't recognized in the bylaw. In order for staff to be transparent with the public, staff are requiring the rules and considerations that we are referencing to be adopted into the bylaws we have to use as tools. Each of the proposed amendments that are before you today are referenced from the Master Municipal Construction Documents, also known as MMCD, design guidelines. The MMCD is recognized as a provincial standard used to supplement municipal bylaws for construction documents and standards. Currently, the driveway access bylaw does not limit how many driveways a single property can have. The proposed number of driveways section will reduce the number of future driveway letdowns in sidewalks, limit the number of potential vehicles accessing a public roadway at any given time, which would also improve sight lines and traffic flow on specifically collector or arterial roads, but also all roads in Summerland, and overall contribute to better public safety for pedestrians, cyclists, and commuters. The driveway access bylaw also currently does not prescribe location of driveways. The purpose of the proposed section is to control the location of driveways on corner lots where the parcel fronts two or more public roadways. When an application is made for a driveway that's not located in an ideal or safe location, staff, as I mentioned, are tasked with researching and referencing external sources that the public tend to challenge or disagree with. So if these proposed amendments are approved, staff will be able to produce the regulations within the District of Summerland's driveway access bylaw, prescribing guidelines for safe driveway locations. So the two sections proposed to be added would assist staff in making timely responses to applicants in a transparent manner. Thank you for your time, Madam Mayor. I'll take any questions if anyone has any.
Okay, thank you, Bobby. Council, you have the presentation slides, so that'll give you a good idea of the proposed amendments. Are there any questions on any of that? Okay, I'll ask somebody. You're getting off easy, Bobby. I'll ask someone to bring forward the staff recommendation, please. Or something else. Councillor Holmes.
I'll bring it forward, but I just have a quick question first, if I may. So for a second driveway, it'd be approved by the Director of Works and Infrastructure. This might be more of a question for our corporate officer, but having that position title in the bylaw, does that not, what happens if that title position has changed, as it has even since my time on council? It's not a statutory position, so to speak. So does that mean then you have to change the bylaw, or is it can be worded in such a way that it's not ambiguous that way? And secondly, if I may follow up also, is it would there be any appeal to any thought given to allowing somebody to appeal to council if they're denied, if that's a normal thing or not?
Yeah, so if I may, I'll start. The title issue with the Director of Works and Infrastructure, it has been included with a different title in other bylaws, such as the Subdivision and Development Services bylaw. It references the Director of Engineering quite frequently, and to which point it has not been updated. Karen may wish to comment further on the wording of this bylaw.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. So often what we can do in bylaws is put or designate. So it would be a title or designate, which kind of allows for any of those changes, or if someone's away and there is someone in an acting position. So that would be my recommendation on that particular issue.
Brad, please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I think it would be best practice to have or designate in there. I do want to stress to council, we do have a more thorough review of this bylaw coming forward in the near future. We hope to address a number of elements that are I think we need to be reviewed within this bylaw throughout the whole bylaw, and perhaps having as designate and that type of terminology included, it would be appropriate at that time. But we're hopeful that we can get through these text amendments, because we are continually bringing these issues forward to developers and to the development community, and just to provide some clarity to the community that this is going to be our requirements, and it has been our requirements for a number of years, would help it being included in the bylaws. So and I do believe, Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, that even if it doesn't include as designate, any case study law would say that it would be the most reasonable comparable to that role, even if the job title changes. Often it happens as well for my role, for example, within the zoning bylaw. I think it still references manager of development services when I'm no longer a manager. Any lawyer would indicate that it would be the closest comparable to that role that the district has.
Thank you, Brad. And Karen or someone, could you answer the second question, and that was about the opportunity to appeal?
Yeah, so currently, if an applicant was to wishing to vary the requirements of the driveway access bylaw, it would come before council in the form of a variance. So something similar would happen in the case of an appeal of the director's decision.
Great, thank you. That answers your questions, Councillor Holmes. Thank you. So could I ask you to bring that forward then, and so we can get it on the floor? Oh, Councillor Barkwell, you have a question as well?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just looking to see if this was applicable in any way to agricultural properties. They're accessed all over the place. without, and I only see one section, 3.2. So can I assume then that it really doesn't apply to agricultural properties other than corner lots as referenced in 3.2?
That is the intent, yes, Councillor Barkov.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, further questions? Councillor Holmes.
I'll move that the Summerland driveway access amendment bylaw 2021-004 be given first, second, and third reading.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Van Elfen. Any further discussion on this text amendment? All right, I will call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? It carries unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Bobby, Brad, Karen. Yes, he's here. Okay, 7.6 is the Fire Protection Mutual Aid Agreement, and our Fire Chief Glenn Noble is here to speak to this one.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I apologize, I don't have a camera, so it's probably best for everybody. That's a good thing. In front of you, Madam Mayor and Council, is a report that's looking for council approval to renew the mutual aid agreement for fire protection within the regional district. That encompasses 5 municipal fire departments, 3 improvement district fire departments, and 6 regional district fire departments. This renewal, this agreement expired in December of 2020. The intent in 2020 was to rewrite the agreement, as it is quite dated. It has been in place for at least 12 years. With COVID and everything that happened, it didn't happen in 2020. The intent is to renew this agreement for 1 year and have this agreement rewritten prior to end of this term, or of this agreement, which would expire once 1 year from the date that all parties sign off. So staff's recommendation is to approve it, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Chief Noble. Council, do you have questions of Glenn while he's here with us? All right, could I have someone bring forward the resolution, please? Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That the Fire Protection Mutual Aid Agreement between the District of Summerland, the Regional District, Okanagan, Food, the Town of Oliver, Town of Osoyoos, Town of Princeton, City of Penticton, the Headley Improvement District, the Oliver Fire Protection District, and the Osoyoos Rural Fire Protection District be extended for a further 1 year term, and that mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute the agreement on behalf of the district.
Thank you, Councillor Van Elfen. Seconder, Councillor Carlson. Further discussion on the mutual aid agreement? I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, another unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Glenn. Uh, 7.7 is the Corporate Energy and Emissions Management Plan, and I will invite our CAO to introduce this item.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Council will recall this came to the last council meeting, at which time there was a discussion with our consultants that helped the preparation of this report and implementation plan. At that time, we committed to bring the plan back to council today, which we are doing. And that's for final approval of the plan. There has not been any substantive changes since the last discussion of council. And we are looking for adoption of the plan today, after which we'll begin the work of implementing the actions of the plan in our operations. We also today have Tammy Rothery, our Sustainability and Alternative Energy Coordinator, present on the call. If in fact there are any additional questions or comments, and with that, I'll pause for council to, if there are any of those.
Any questions, council? Okay, could I have someone bring forward the recommendation to adopt this? Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question through to Tammy, if I may. Rumor has it that we've got 3 electrical SUVs coming. Is that true?
Thank you through the chair. So I see Chris has jumped on as well, and maybe he can help me out here. But staff did hear council's request for us to revisit the fleet decisions as part of the 2021 budget. And we have identified 3 opportunities to convert to electric rather than the standard gas or diesel options that we had been looking at. And I believe that we're moving forward with just confirming the budget for those, but maybe Chris, you can help me out.
Sure, thanks, Tammy. Yeah, so there was one SUV that was in the current fleet budget for replacement this year. So we're looking at an electric option for that. And then we were looking, I think there was 8 pickups that were on the list for 2021. So we are looking to purchase 2 of those as electric SUVs, shift them to somewhere else in the fleet, and take the existing pickups where the electrical vehicles will go and put those back where these pickups were intended. So the total intent for 2021 is looking at 3 electrical vehicles.
Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I could just follow up, it's just a request. If and when they do come, would you guys be so kind as to bring them to Municipal Hall parking lot so we can have a look at them? I'm quite excited. I'd love to go for a test drive if one of you guys would take me on one, but just excited that that's happening and coming, to the district in the near future. And I'd be happy to put the resolution on the table, Madam Mayor, if I could.
Yes, just one moment. Councillor
Okay.
Barkwell, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, are you referring to fully electric pickup trucks or hybrid?
We're currently looking at SUV, fully electric SUVs.
Fully electric for all 3 or just the SUV?
Yeah, for all 3, sorry. That instead of purchasing 2 of the pickups, we would be looking to purchase 2 additional electric SUVs that would be moved in the fleet where that makes sense, and move existing pickups elsewhere in the fleet. So thoughts are right now that there's an SUV with development services and 2 pickups, one with Bylaw and one that's at Municipal Hall for the future metering tech position. Thoughts are that those 2 pickups could be SUVs as well. So then we would have 3 SUVs housed out of the Municipal Hall parking lot and be used by staff at a Municipal Hall. And those 2 existing pickups would go into the works fleet for now.
I see. You're substituting an SUV for a pickup because pickups aren't electric yet, I guess.
Correct.
Yes.
And for those tasks where an SUV still makes sense. Yeah.
Right. Okay, thank you.
CEO, did you want to speak any further on this?
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I'll just add, we did a deep dive on each of these just to see, based on our business need, what really did require the use of a pickup truck and what could be down size to an SUV that's on electric, and that's where these came from. And I would say it's a starting point for 2021. And as we get into further years, we'll continue to look to green the fleet. And we are excited about seeing the many options that are coming through many of the major automotive manufacturers as it relates to electric vehicles. So exciting time to be doing that work.
Great, thank you so much. Councillor Van Alphen, I'll take you up on your offer now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That the corporate energy and emissions management plan as attached to the report from the Sustainability Alternative Energy Coordinator dated March 8th, 2021 be adopted.
Thank you. Seconder. Councillor Traynor, thank you. Any further discussion on this? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Great. Good. Thank you so much, all of you. That's it's nice to keep all of us challenged with getting our carbon emissions down corporately. So thank you so much for that. Okay.
Madam Mayor, I'm going to recuse myself before you start the next item.
Oh,
Someone
yes,
can
thank you.
Text me or call me when
7.8.
you're done.
All right, thank you. So 7.8 is a Savannah Ridge Cherries Inc. water request. And I will start with you, Graham, on this one.
Thank you, Your Worship. So at the January 25th council meeting, we did have a delegation from Savannah Ridge Cherries Incorporated that came to council requesting access to water supply at Garnet Reservoir. And staff have since evaluated the request further, have exchanged information with other parties, including the ministry and the provincial government, the RDOS and others, and have explored all the considerations around this. And our advice is that the request from Savannah Ridge Cherries be denied at this time. I will turn it over though to Chris to walk us through the details of the advice and to provide additional context or information regarding our recommendation. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, CAO. Yeah, so just want to step through a few slides here just to go through the background, the request, and some of the information that we've gathered through this process. So next slide, Karen.
Can you see that, Chris?
Yep, we're good. If you can go to the next slide, please.
Okay.
So Savannah Ridge Cherries is currently a 75-acre cherry orchard.
Someone's happy to be here.
Sorry, just go back one, Karen. There you go. It's currently a 75-acre cherry orchard located within Meadow Valley in the RDOS. The orchard has accommodations for up to 80 workers within the summer months. And it's located about 750 meters west of Garnet Reservoir and sits at an elevation about 125 meters above the water level. So the next slide talks about the request specifically. So Savannah Ridge Cherries was looking for about somewhere between 40 to 80 megaliters of water from the Garnet Reservoir, ideally between the months of May and July each year. In exchange for this, Savannah Ridge was proposing to provide annual funding to the district to help maintain Eneas Dam, which is upstream of the Garnet Reservoir. So with discussions with with Savannah Ridge and with the ministry, we determined their existing water licenses for the cherry orchard. They've got 2 groundwater licenses that allow them to pump up to 90 megaliters per year, but the license does limit them to a rate of 46 gallons per minute. And this rate isn't sufficient during the summer demands, and hence they have a storage lagoon on site that allows them to supplement that additional need during those months from their groundwater wells. They also have a runoff diversion license that they draw from an ephemeral pond, or sorry, ephemeral stream, which is redirected to the storage pond as well. So in discussions with Flynn Rowe, we looked at what other water options would the orchard have. They had applied for a diversion license from Ackland Creek, which was denied. They also requested water from Meadow Valley Ridge Irrigation District, but they did not receive a formal response for that request. Talking to Flynn Rowe, they feel that the best option for Savannah Ridge is to connect to the Meadow Valley Irrigation District system. But the Meadow Valley Irrigation District does have concerns with this. Currently, they divide their water allocation from Dark Lake on a percentage basis to the small number of users within Meadow Valley. And any additional users to this would either force them to reduce the water that's provided to the current users or require a significant investment in the Dark Lake Dam to be raised to allow for additional storage. And to put it in context, the Savannah Ridge request would make up somewhere between 3 to 7% of the annual Dark Lake volume, which is currently 1,200 megaliters. So looking at Garnet Reservoir, it sees an average annual runoff of approximately 2,840 megaliters per year, mainly from groundwater, which is influenced through two main factors. There's a diversion of up to or just over 600 megaliters per year from the Lapsley Creek and Finley Creek to Dark Lake. There's also a significant amount of groundwater that's returned from the Dark Creek Valley, which is typically significant, but would be much less during any times of drought. So although Garnet Reservoir has a live storage of 2,360 megaliters, the district has been maintaining the level at about 85% of full pool to mitigate flood risk downstream, and also in lieu of doing some additional repairs to the face of that dam. So right now, the water demand in Garnet Reservoir, or out of Garnet Reservoir, is about 700 megaliters per year, with the additional water being released into Eneas Creek to maintain flows. So staff's recommendation is, as our CEO had stated, is that the request from Savannah Cherries be denied at this time. Some of the reasons for this are that in order to service this parcel, which is in the RDOS, we'd be servicing it outside of our municipal boundaries with water. This would potentially set a precedent for other properties within Meadow Valley to make similar requests to the district. And right now, our potential future demands out of Garnet are unknown. There's the likelihood that we'll see expansion of agricultural lands in Garnet Valley. We're seeing it already in some of the higher elevations where we typically hadn't seen certain types of crops. Now we're seeing those expand into those areas. And the additional demand increases provide a level of uncertainty with our water supply during dry or drought years, which are also a concern as climate change continues to progress. So for those reasons, staff is recommending a denial of this application or this request at this time. So with that, I will turn it over to council for any questions.
Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, thank you. Just for clarification, so the Dark Lake Reservoir is the responsibility of the Meadow Valley Irrigation District, and the Eneas Lake Reservoir is our responsibility?
That's correct.
So how does that work? How do they? Okay, I'll have to look at the water flows, but doesn't one flow into another, and they all flow into Garnet?
No, Eneas flows into Garnet. Dark Lake is in its separate valley. But perhaps Devin, you could explain the diversion between the two.
Yeah, so once the water reaches Finley Lapsley Creek, it is diverted from that location into Dark Lake, and generally they take care of that diversion on their own at the specified time of year. But they do often connect with us and let us know that they're diverting certain times a year. So if they had, some preference to divert more in a given year, then they would have that communication with us.
Okay, and another question, if I may, regarding Eneas Lake. Do we have where are we at in terms of decommissioning that reservoir, and do we have plans in place?
Yeah, so thank you, Councillor Holmes, for the question. We in the 2021 budget and work plan, we have funds to look at the options for Eneas Dam and Eneas Reservoir. Currently in the water master plan, in the 2008 master plan, as well as the update that we're working on now, there's a recommendation to look at decommissioning that. With the increased costs as far as the monitoring and maintenance on the dam, as well as the travel distance to the dam and the minimal amount of storage that it provides, the recommendations are leaning towards decommissioning. However, staff will be bringing a report back to council later this year to provide details around that and obtain direction from council if we would like to proceed with the decommissioning or not. And then there's funds currently for 2022 to follow through with that deconstruction work if that's the direction of council this year.
Okay, and maybe just one other thing, if I may.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was on that. So at RDS last week, we had a report from the consultant on the Naramata dams, which was quite an interesting discussion. And we were talking about decommissioning dams, and he was saying that that you're often better off maintaining them in place because mainly because you have to deal with the federal government DFO and any potential fish habitat that they've become fish habitats, these reservoirs, and if you're going to you'd end up having to replace those habitats for fish if they some exist. And he also said the regulation requirements are pretty unclear right now, but they are becoming clearer. That's what he said. And so we may want to wait until the DFO has more of is able to bring out some more information. So I'm sure you're all aware of that, but it was pretty enlightening to me.
Yeah, if I can just expand on that a little bit. There has been some discussion prior to going through with the design of decommissioning that we consider a study that suggests what effect decommissioning of the dam will have to the downstream areas. So something to consider.
Any other questions? Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the diversion to divert water to go over to Dark Lake, is that utilized during flood season at all? Like if we're, flooding in Garnet, I guess they're flooding in Dark also? Is that the case generally, or do we divert water during high water times to help us, or?
They are generally diverting water through the summer months once the peak freshet has subsided.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Trainer.
Thank you. Chris, would you just be able to remind us what options they do have if we deny this? I think you briefly touched on it in your report, but if you could just remind us, that would be great.
Yeah, for sure. I guess currently it would be pursuing the option within the Meadow Valley Irrigation District. They submitted a request but didn't receive a formal response. But in discussions with Flinro, and our thoughts are that would be their best option. So it would be researching further with them about obtaining a portion of that water from the Dark Lake reservoir. That would mean that other users within Meadow Valley would potentially see a smaller amount of water because that total volume would be now split over an additional user. Or they invest, I believe they had told us approximately $1 million into Dark Lake to raise the dam to provide additional storage for all of their users. Alternatively, they could look at additional wells, but I believe they drilled a number of wells initially and were able to get a significant or a decent flow out of 2 of them, and they weren't confident that any additional wells would provide much more storage, and they might start drawing from the same aquifer if they were to do that. So really it's within the Meadow Valley Irrigation District would be their option to see what's available there.
I'll go to you in just a moment, Councillor Van Elfen. So following up on Councillor Trainer's question just now, if there was a particularly, or maybe more than one, but maybe we'll just take 1 year, a drought, a dry year, and there was nothing going into their storage pond from the ephemeral stream, would that be a devastating year for that 75-acre cherry orchard?
So if I may, Madam Mayor, I believe in talking with Keith Carlson and when he was at council to present initially, he had said that their storage pond would likely help them through 1 year of drought or through one dry year. It would be a subsequent dry year that then they would have issues with the adequate water for their orchard. So they that's where they would see a challenge if there was 2 years back to back that were droughts.
Okay, thank you. On to you, Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Meadow Valley Irrigation District, is that self-owned? Or is that owned by the RDOS? Or is it self-financed by the users?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I believe it is. It's self-maintained and self-driven by that group of users. There is a Meadow Valley Irrigation District director, who looks after things, but I don't know exactly how they're set up.
So then just following up on that, Savannah Ridge Cherries Incorporated may want to have a discussion with the regional district to maybe help them, because they haven't had any response from Meadow Valley Irrigation District. Maybe they need to have the discussion with the regional district then. Just a thought. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for staff? Councillor Barkwell.
I was just wondering if staff knew, I didn't see it in the report, but it might be there. How much storage volume we're licensed for in the three Eneas lakes?
I would have to look at the license, but the actual
For Eneas, our current live storage is 148 megaliters.
Okay, 148 megaliters, not very big at all.
No, where Garnet Reservoir is 2360.
Yeah, I was thinking about how drawing it down in the winters and letting it fill in the spring might ameliorate some of the flooding we get in Garnet, but it seems like the impact would be quite minimal. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'm off topic, really.
How did you know I was thinking that, Councillor Barkwell? That's okay. Would you like to bring forward a motion? Councillor Barkwell.
I'll bring forward the motion as presented in the agenda, and that the request from Savannah Ridge Cherries Inc. for the supply of water from Garnet Reservoir be denied.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Patton. Further discussion on this resolution? Okay, I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. It's unfortunate, but that's sometimes how it happens. Okay, thank you. And we have a break scheduled now. 10-minute break, so we're going to take a couple minutes more because we're a little bit early. So we'll be back at 5 after 3, please. 3:05. See everyone then. Okay, we'll resume our afternoon regular council meeting, starting with 7.10 Eneas Creek update. And over to you, Chris Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to have Karen assist me with sharing another presentation for this one. So this is an update to the Eneas Creek project and the flooding that occurred in 2018. Thanks, Karen. If you can just jump to the second slide. So the update today, I'm looking to give council just an overview of where we're at with our Water Sustainability Act Section 11 approvals. Talk about the status of the disaster financial assistance from that 2018 event, and look at the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund that we applied for under the Structural Flood Mitigation Stream last fall, and that we just received word on a few weeks ago. And the our recent application under the flood mitigation planning stream. So first, just to give council a bit of background and a refresher on where we're at, the flood event that occurred in 2018 created some damage along numerous sections and locations along Eneas Creek. We completed an assessment that was finalized in April of 2019 on the approximate 16-kilometer stretch from Garnet Reservoir all the way to Okanagan Lake. And it identified numerous recommendations and potential improvement projects along that stretch, a number which were on private property and a handful that were within the district right-of-ways and property that we could look at moving forward with. So with that, following that report, we submitted application for Section 11 for 6 projects, 5 of which are listed here from the section from Highway 97 to Okanagan Lake. Just briefly, 1.1 is the remediation of the Centennial Trail and the removal of danger trees along that section. 1.2 is the removal of lock blocks and restoring the bank stability on Peach Orchard Road near Blewett Road. 1.3 is remediating the creek banks within the Peach Orchard campground. 1.7 is another section along Peach Orchard Road, this time near Charles Avenue, that needs some erosion protection. And 1.8 is removal of the deposited material at the mouth of Eneas Creek into Okanagan Lake. And the 6th project on this slide, the next slide here, is 3.7. So that's the improvement of the creek capacity near Garnet Avenue and Tingley Street. So this section currently has the gabion baskets and that were placed along the south side of this section to reinforce it from potentially flooding, and that would breach the banks and then head towards downtown. So this is a critical section along Eneas Creek where significant measures were taken and are still in place. The intent is that with this project, we would look at removal of vegetation through there, dredging of the creek itself to lower the bed of the creek as much as possible, and look at removing as much of the gabions and berm that's there now to a more naturalized state. So yeah, those 6 applications are in, and they're with the province right now. The next slide talks about timelines. So in January 2020, we commenced the detailed design. In May, we submitted an environmental management plan that was requested to accompany our Section 11 applications. And so in June of this last year, the province deemed them final and actually submitted. With that, we required letters of agency from any adjacent landowners. So we worked with the 6 locations and obtained letters of agency from those. Basically, this allows our consultant and the district to act on their behalf with the province to look at any works that are required adjacent to or on their private property. In August of 2020, the application was officially processed into the system. In December, we met with Flinro to discuss the application, and we're expecting the approval to happen sometime in the next 2 to 3 months. And so with that, once the approvals are received, we can finalize the detailed design, get the tender packages out. And once the tenders are out and received, we will have a better idea on construction schedule. And one of the items that we're expecting from this approval process is there will be windows where construction is permitted and when it's not. And the province will obviously want us to see work within those windows as much as possible, but there will be possible relaxation or mitigation measures that can happen outside of those windows, provided we put those measures in place during construction. So it's sort of a once we get these approvals and have further discussion with the province, we'll know more on possible proposed timelines for these works. So next slide shows just a summary of the funding to date. I guess we had some further discussions with EMBC about what would be eligible under the DFA program and what would not. In the 2021 budget, we currently assumed that these works would be fully funded either through DFA or through grant funding. Unfortunately, we recently received notice that our structural flood mitigation application was not successful. So what's shown on here now are the DFA amounts that we are confident in discussions with them that would likely be approved, and then the remaining portion which would need to be funded through the district or wait until another grant application could be submitted and hopefully received. And just to note, the total cost of these projects in the original 2021 budget, we had $785,000. With recent detailed design work, we've reduced that amount to $720, just for council's note. So the next two slides talk about the Community Emergency Management Fund. So the structural flood mitigation, as I discussed, we received word at the end of January that our application was not successful. We met with the EMBC in Flinroe to discuss this and find out reasons why and what we could do on future applications or where their concerns were. They noted that it is heavily oversubscribed, as most of these application programs are. They had noted that they preferred more of a full system approach to ensure that flood risk is mitigated for the whole stretch, but did agree with grouping a lot of these smaller projects together to have larger economies of scale and looking at a larger area. But they were concerned about sort of the overall flow capacity in Aeneas Creek, and a lot of these works were more repairs and mitigation from damage that was seen in 2018, and didn't really address the restrictions or the limited flow capacity through there. The recommended design flow for a channel is the 1 in 200 year event, which for Aeneas Creek would be ridiculously high compared to what is currently seen within that creek channel today, as far as what could be passed through there. There's lots of areas that go through urban sections where it's significantly reduced and significantly restricted, and would require either likely purchasing of private property to widen the creek channel to provide larger embankments on either side of it in order to pass that. So what they suggested was we look at some additional flood mapping and flood mitigation planning for Aeneas Creek to assess it at that 1 in 200 year event to see what that actually would mean, and then work our way back to see if there's a more reasonable design flow event that we could agree upon as being recommended for this creek for long-term planning purposes. So if you jump to the next slide, Karen, this is where the flood mitigation planning application, I guess, came from, is that after the discussion with them on February 11th, we were aware of this program that was out for, that was due on February 26th. So we quickly put together an application that would achieve those items that were noted in the discussion, to look at the 1 in 200 year event, to identify what those improvements would be and the magnitude and the cost versus the risk to the community. Looking at analyzing and mapping other key return periods and see if there was a more realistic design flow that could be agreed upon for the channel. And then developing some cost benefit comparisons for this to look at the recommended improvements versus the increased flow capacity. So with this, the application was submitted on the 26th. However, a council resolution in support of it is required to accompany the application. Hence why we're just with the way the application and timelines went from the discussions with Flinroe and EMBC to preparing the application to getting to council. We're asking for support of this application after the fact, and we'll submit our resolution if we receive it today, tomorrow, to accompany this application to the province. So as far as recommended actions and next steps with Eneas Creek, we've got the Water Sustainability Act approvals that we're waiting to hear from. Once we have those, we can issue the tender documents and look at securing accurate pricing and confirming potential construction schedules. We'll continue to seek out other grants if and when they become available. But once we have the approvals in place and have a better idea on timelines, we'll be coming back to council to look at if there's any priority projects that we are able to move forward with in 2021 with district funds, in addition to the DFA funding that we expect to receive, or if this work needs to be deferred until future years in order to obtain and secure the funding that's required. So with that, I'll open it up to council for any questions.
Okay, council, questions? Chris, go ahead, Councillor Barkwell.
Well, thank you. I'm looking at the list of the specific projects and the budgets, Garnet Avenue and Tingley being the most expensive and maybe the most important at $250,000. Are all of these equally important, or should we be considering which ones we should really tackle first? And secondly, I see that the big issue with that area is the trees that grow into the creek. And would the remediation work do anything to slow the regrowth of the trees and choking the creek again? Or is it just we're going to be faced with the same problem in 10 years? Or
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Barkwell. So yeah, the removal of that regrowth, it will be an ongoing maintenance item, and it will be something that we're looking to get in place. There are other creeks and channels where we've received 5-year maintenance licenses or agreements with the province, where we can go in there annually during specific windows to do vegetation management. This would be one that, following this work, we would be looking to try to get something like that in place as well, because it will be an ongoing concern if it's not managed.
Mm-hmm. And as far as the priorities, like
yeah, I guess that's where, yeah, we intend to have that conversation with council once we have the approvals, once we have an idea on if there's any timeline restrictions based on the Water Act approvals that we received. But they've all been in their current state since the flood event in 2018. We've received a few calls on the outlet. Obviously, with the buildup of debris, there's not a lot of freeboard between the top of the water and the banks at that outlet location between those two properties there. We're continuing to monitor the erosion along Peach Orchard Road, and during current flows, it's not adding or increasing to the risk there, but we do face challenges in freshet if and when these flows do increase. We could see ourselves in another emergent situation where we're calling a state of local emergency and dealing with one of these locations on an emergency basis, which would then be through EMBC, through an EAF request to deal with these in that emergent situation versus waiting. So it's, yeah, as far if and when we have to get to determine a priority, I guess we'd like to understand the timelines and the restrictions around what the province would like us to see on the environmental side. But they've all sort of been in their current state for the last 2 years, and we haven't seen any increase in issues. But there are obviously some, like the trail, that we'd like to get repaired sooner than later, just so they can be used again. And obviously up at Garnet Ave and Tingley, removing those gabions from the private property and allowing that owner sort of unrestricted access to their properties for their orchard.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it's been at least 2 years ago, last time we were able to be at UBCM, we met with Flynn Rowe. And maybe Chris, you can remind me, at that time we asked if the district of Summerland could be like a front counter BC agent for private landowners? Because for each and every individual landowners to apply to FLNRO can be quite onerous. And I think we were asking FLNRO at the time if we could act as front counter. Can you report on that or remind me where we're at on that?
Yeah, so thank you, Councillor Van Alphen. That was the discussion, was could the district or a hired additional position with the district be that middleman between property owners and Front Counter BC for any applications on private work? The intent of the overall assessment was to provide sort of an overall and a coordinated view and potential improvements that could happen. As far as the private works, a lot of those, like, we haven't seen any or had any requests come our way that private property owners sort of from the Garnet Ave and Tingley area north up Garnet Valley towards the dam. It doesn't appear that anyone's actively pursuing any changes or improvements to the creek along there. However, that was the thought, is that if we were looking at improving the overall channel capacity, it was going to need to be a coordinated effort. And that's sort of where the province now through this latest grant application is sort of kicking it back to us and saying, that is what we need to establish, is sort of the ultimate design flow. And that in their minds, the current channel capacity and what we're seeing is likely going to need to be increased. So then what does that mean to these properties? I think at that time, if we're looking to sort of go through the whole channel from Lake back up to Garnet Dam, then we would definitely be more actively working with these property owners and the province to try to facilitate these improvements. However, a lot of them are on private property. They're going to require likely some private investment on those. However, the recommendation is to start at the mouth of the creek and work our way upstream. And so these 6 projects that are within the district's control are likely the ones that we would tackle first, so that we're not increasing capacity upstream and then having a bottleneck downstream that's now going to be even more of an issue. So long story short is, yeah, that's what we were looking to get, but I don't think we're at that stage, and nor are the private property owners at that stage to move forward with any improvements until we have sort of a better understanding of what that ultimate future capacity should be and what makes sense.
Thank you.
Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I can appreciate staff's frustration on this. You know, it's coming on 3 years since then, and you know, we've done all this work. We kind of know where we need to start, and then the province just keeps kicking it back to you with saying we need to do this, we need to do that. And you know, it's 3 years after disaster, and we're still not able to clean up, and we're told the program is heavily oversubscribed. Well, of course it's heavily oversubscribed. The flood caused a lot of damage, and so I think I don't know, is there any interest in escalating this, taking it back to UBCM, talking to ministers again? Because I really think it's the province that's dropping the ball on here. They're letting us down. They're letting this community down big time, because we can't clean up after a disaster that happened 3 years ago. There's something wrong here.
Graham, did you want to speak to that, about if it would make sense to go to UBCM with this again?
So my assessment, thank you, Madam Mayor, and I suppose through to Councillor Holmes, my assessment would be, given the efforts that have taken place, the good faith efforts that have taken place on the part of the district to move the ball forward on this that have not been successful. Some advocacy with the province is desirable, and it would certainly also, if nothing else, raise the issue of the program needs to the province, but might also raise the priority, as it were, of our own projects in this area, because there is real risk here without being able to, you know, make the proper mitigations and adaptations, getting the funding that we need to do that. there's a real risk that future flooding could impact these areas in a greater way. So certainly, if there's some opportunity to engage at the political level on this, I think it's something that staff could support. Absolutely.
And we don't have to wait for UBCM to have conversations with ministries. Councillor Van Elfen.
I have to concur with Councillor Holmes. This is 3 years have gone by. I just had a phone call less than a month ago from a landowner on Garnet Avenue in Tingley that's very concerned about what are we going to do? Every year, most years his orchard's flooded out. He can't get his sprays on. He loses his crop. This has been going on and on and on. And there's a way to resolve this, and 3 years have gone by and we've done nothing. I guess the only other option we would have is hope and pray for an emergency situation so we can finally go in and mitigate this problem. But if we have to wait for the government, we could be talking about this in another 3 years. And I mean, I agree with Councillor Holmes. We've done our due diligence time and time again here. I mean, what Chris and his department has done, I commend them, but it's time to put some pressure where pressure is needed to be put and get on with this. And the same as private landowners. I'm one of them. I have lots of work I need to do, but I'm not, to try to apply to Flynn Road directly. I've been waiting for, our district to be an agent for Flynn Road, to make things more simplified for the landowners, the private landowners that are willing to invest some money in repairing these problems that came about in 2018. So I agree. I'd like to see us put some pressure where pressure's due and get on with this situation. Thank you.
CAO, I'll go to you and then to Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I will just say that it would still be our recommendation for the purposes of today's decision making that we get council support on the resolution to make the grant application. I think the two things can happen in parallel. Should council choose to pursue advocacy, it's not mutually exclusive with also at the same time pursuing the program grant funding opportunities.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson.
I'm just wondering, as March comes and April and May, if we see flooding again, what kind of plan we have in place to communicate to landowners, what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do. People will be in there with their excavators and they will be digging out their creeks again. And we don't want that. The province doesn't want that. That's not the solution. But that's what's going to happen. So I'm just wondering if the district has some, is that on the radar for 2021? We know there's lots of snow in those mountains and we don't know how fast it's going to come down.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Carlson. That's something we can definitely look at, putting some messaging out there to owners if and when there are flooding issues that we're seeing along Eneas Creek, at least having the information ready and on hand to advise them of the process they need to go through to protect their buildings and their land. From the district standpoint, if it's district infrastructure, it's through a state or local emergency, and then we're allowed to take the required measures. Any work in and around the stream, though, we still have to report on what we've done, but it's more of a reporting instead of a getting approval beforehand. So we can confirm those answers for the private owners and have those ready and even share that in advance of freshet.
Thank you. I think it'd be very valuable.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to put the recommendation on the table, if I may.
Good, thank you.
That an application to the UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, Flood Risk Assessment, Flood Mapping, and Flood Mitigation Planning in the amount of $120,000 for the Aeneas Creek Flood Mitigation Plan be supported, and the District of Summerland provide overall grant management should the application be successful.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Holmes. Any further discussion on this motion? Councillor Barkwell.
Yeah, in the grant application, to be more persuasive, is there sort of a way we can illustrate how much more important this is for our community versus, say, another community? What comes to my mind is the logging you see in that drainage and the fire too. If you go up at the right time of year to see the difference between the amount of snow in the forested area and the amount of snow in the cleared areas, it's quite remarkable. And that means that the same amount of water, which might not normally be a flood situation, comes down so much faster. And I wonder if that can strengthen our case. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Council. On to 7.11, letter of support, community-based Aeneas Creek watershed profile, Okanagan Fisheries Foundation. And this is for you as well, Chris.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So yeah, this report is to consider providing a letter of support to the Okanagan Fisheries Foundation for their application to the Okanagan Basin Water Board's Water Conservation and Quality Improvement Grant Program. So the applications must include a letter of support from a local government in the area where the project will occur. The application was submitted on February 26th, so due to timelines, again, with the request coming forward and the application deadline, the letter of support would be submitted after the fact. But the OBWB has provided approval for the Okanagan Fisheries Foundation to submit this by March 12th. So the district received the request from Lauren Davies of GeoStream Environmental Consulting on behalf of the Okanagan Fisheries Foundation. And I believe Mr. Davies is on the call or available during this presentation or once I'm finished to answer any questions that council may have. But the goal of the project is to work with First Nations for sustainable fish habitat within the Okanagan watershed. And the Okanagan Fisheries Foundation felt that there's a need for a more understandable watershed profile report that's more holistic and integrates local knowledge for Aeneas Creek. The Aeneas Creek watershed was selected as an example watershed due to the current complexity with recent flooding, forest fires, and prescribed burns, historic and current projects involving non-government organizations, ongoing research, and existing partnerships. So the report would include the upper Crown land portion and the lower urban portion of the watershed. They would divide the watershed into smaller management units, use photographs, and a few strategic indicators to identify components within each management unit, summarize the condition of the watershed management unit, and use photographs for baseline monitoring and prioritize areas for protection and restoration. So with this, there's no financial implication to the district other than potentially some time in answering questions and providing information to GeoStream Environmental through the process. And so with that, given the nature of the project and the potential benefits to the district and Aeneas Creek watershed, staff recommend that a letter of support be provided to accompany the grant program that the Okanagan Fisheries Foundation is applying for. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Chris. Any questions, council? Could I have someone bring forward the staff recommendation, please, to support this with a letter? Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That a letter of support be provided to the Okanagan Fisheries Foundation submission to Okanagan Basin Water Board Water Conservation and Quality Improvement Grant Program for the community-based Aeneas Creek watershed profile as outlined in a report from the Director of Works and Infrastructure dated March 8th, 2021.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Patton, thank you. Further discussion? Councillor Barkwell.
Yeah, I sure hope that they're successful with this project. It would be such a benefit to us, and maybe it'll be able to quantify a little bit the issue that I was just speaking to concerning the other application, the change in the rate that the water comes down by mapping the cleared areas and things.
Yeah, good point, Councillor Barkwell. Okay, all in favor, sending the letter of support? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. And oh, Chris, you're off the hook now. 7.12 is local government liaison appointment to the Chamber of Commerce. This is for Karen, our corporate officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is simply to change the appointment of Councillor Holmes to Councillor Patton for the Chamber of Commerce. It's a one-year appointment that will expire next April 1st, 2022.
Okay. I'm presuming that Doug is okay with this. Councillor Patton, I mean, pardon me.
Absolutely.
Yes,
No
thank
problem.
you. Councillor Van Alphen, are you making the motion?
I am, Madam Mayor, as presented.
Thank you. So Councillor Holmes's appointment be rescinded and Councillor Patton is on until April the 1st, 2022. Seconder? Councillor Traynor, thank you. Further discussion? Let's not talk about it. Let's just get Councillor Patton appointed. All in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Barkwell, you're not really opposed, are you? No. No.
I was reaching for my my mute button so I could say before he changes his mind.
Okay, thank you. And then 7.13 is the addition to the agenda today, and that is the fees and services bylaw. I'll pass this over to Karen as well.
Thank you, Your Worship. This amendment is to the fees and charges solid waste bylaw appendix, and it is for first, second, and third reading. As council remembers, at the February 26th meeting, we were adopting this bylaw, so the fees and charges could be put in place for March 1st. The appropriate way to remove the fees that were requested by council is actually to do the amendment. So this is an administrative cleanup to remove the $1 fee for the one-time use small canisters that are left at the landfill. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you. I don't think we have questions on this. Would someone like to bring this forward, please? Councillor Holmes, thank you. And Councillor Traynor seconding. Any further discussion on this? I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Carries. All right. And I don't have anyone showing as wishing to speak. Do you have any updates on that, Karen?
There is no one on the line, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So I'll ask for a resolution to go into closed, please. Councillor Van Alphen, Councillor Holmes.